And this last couple weeks have been a little stressful because I knew it was coming up, and I had my topic down, I had my verses down, but I hadn't formed them together. I hadn't put the time and the effort to make them make sense. And I spent the 3.5 hour drive home last night from Austin while my wife was driving. And if you can imagine studying anything while my wife is driving. I spent the 3.5 hours on the way home studying. I got up early this morning and got here and studied some more. And I can tell you for a fact that this is what God has placed on my heart. But how He uses it is completely unknown to me. We're going to start off in Jeremiah chapter 20. And what I want you to do is I want you to have an open mind, but I also want you to understand that we're about to read scripture that kind of puts people that we love and that we struggle with sometimes. It puts people in the forefront of our minds. And I'm going to read starting in verse 7. Jeremiah chapter 20, starting in verse 7. O Lord, you deceived me, and I was deceived. You overpowered me and prevailed. I am ridiculed all day long. Everyone mocks me. Whenever I speak, I cry out. I proclaim violence and destruction. So the word of the Lord has brought me insult and reproach all day long. But if I say I will not mention Him or speak any more in His name, His word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary and holding on to it. Indeed, I cannot. I hear many whispering, terror on every side. Report him. Let's report him. All my friends are waiting for me to slip and say, perhaps he will be deceived. And then we will prevail over him and take our revenge on him. Jeremiah has a lot of things that correlate to Jesus. Jeremiah is called in the first chapter of Jeremiah. He's called by God and set apart. And he goes through the struggle of trying to figure out what it is God has called him to do. And when he does start doing it, it seems like all he's saying to people is, you're sinners, you're screwing up, God's going to bring wrath on you, destruction, destruction, destruction. And so Jeremiah gets to this point in chapter 20 where he's like, I'm tired. I've been doing what you called me to do. I've been doing everything that I felt like you have set in front of me, and I'm getting beat up by the same people that I'm supposed to love. I'm getting torn down. I'm getting ridiculed by the same people that you've called me here to share who you are with. You know, the idea behind Jeremiah's struggle, we've heard this kind of this statement before in verse 9, a fire in my bones. You know, a lot of times we think when we hear that statement in church or we hear that in a religious setting, we think that that's God trying to pour his way out because we're shutting him up. But what Jeremiah is saying that's not it. He's saying, I'm feeling beat up and every word I say brings nothing but destruction on myself. And they don't get it. They don't understand. And so inside of me it's burning because they don't comprehend what I'm saying. They're not understanding the aspect of torment in my life. All because I'm doing what I feel like God's called me to do. You know, we in college I studied a lot about Old Testament prophets. I had an Old Testament prophet class, and the thing going into Jeremiah is every professor that teaches the Old Testament prophets will tell you he's labeled as the weeping prophet. And it's not because he does a great deal of crying, it's because he does a great deal of whining. And the professor I had, his name was Professor Rourke, and he honestly set out to say that if you expect your Christian walk to be different than Jeremiah, you're deceiving yourself. Because we as humans like to whine when we know we're doing something we're supposed to do and not getting the results we need or we want. And so Jeremiah is labeled the weeping prophet. Jeremiah was called to talk to the Jews about what they were doing, because the Jews had gotten to a place where they really felt like God was obligated to take care of them. They really felt like everything that they were doing, God was obligated to forgive them. God was obligated to deliver them from chaos. God was obligated to take them out of their misery. You know, and we see through the first 15 chapters in Jeremiah the struggle with the people. On a side note, the great thing for me about Jeremiah that piqued my interest is, you know, there's a lot of prophets in the Old Testament that we find history about outside of the Bible. Jeremiah was a prophet that we found history about from a war scenario. Okay, so my little side note brings excitement to me because I'm a war buff. And doesn't have to be recent wars. You know, the War 1812, I did a huge paper on it, a 35-page paper on a short war. But the war with Babylon, the struggle with Babylon is what I'm talking about right here. Because Jeremiah, the letters and the outcries to the people, the Jews, was written on pots. And they were thrown in defense of the city against the Babylonians. These pots were thrown trying to inflict pain, trying to inflict fire, and deter the Babylonians from coming in and taking over everything. And so this prophet's words were thrown in anger, in security, in everything that you can think of in order to protect yourself. And the whole time, it's talking about how messed up these people really are. Jeremiah is telling them, you know, you're falling away from God. You're not understanding what it is God has created you to do, and yet they're taking this prophet and throwing it at the same people that wanted to feed them. So in my mind, and I take a very loose imagination, I can see some of these Babylonians picking up these pieces of pots, and it's telling about how these people are just idiots. You know, and these are the people we're fighting. These people are just they're straying away from everything they believe. They're in disorder. And so in my mind, the battle is really won already. Even though it hasn't been completely fought, the battle is really won because these people are being talked to by their prophet and how bad they really are screwing up. And when we take a look at history, when we take a look at battles that are fought and struggles that we have in our lives, we see how far hurt can actually go. And we see how easy it is for us to allow things to come into our lives and hurt us. You know, I got really hurt when I was a young child by a neighbor friend. He really kind of destroyed me. He really kind of made me think I was not worth anything. As I grew up and started realizing that he was just trying to be mean, the more I realized that the words he said and the things he did didn't really affect me as deep. But now when I was in high school, the church hurt me. There were people in the church that kept me in constant hurt. Because I wasn't good enough. I couldn't speak eloquently enough. I didn't wear the right clothes. I listened to the wrong music. The church hurt me. And I can tell you right now, I held on to that for a long time. And today, as we kind of read through Jeremiah, as we kind of step through some other things, I want to talk to you today about being hurt in the church. I want to talk to you about the difference of being hurt by somebody that you could expect it from out in the world, but being hurt by the church, which you hold to a different standard. Even though we're made up of men and women who struggle just as much as everyone else, we don't expect to be hurt by the church. We don't expect to have those inner struggles with the people that we go to church with. We expect it to be set aside. We expect our behaviors to be different, but we're people. You know, when I was studying for this, I looked at some preachers that had talked about church issues, and had talked about kind of stability problems in their church. And there were several preachers that lined things out with it all boiled down to the fact that when you get hurt in the church, you expect something different in return. When you get hurt in the church, you expect to be made whole instantly. You expect the idea of forgiveness, which is preached about all the time, to be readily available. And so when we don't see that, we get disappointed. To me, there's three different types of people that deal with being hurt in the church. There's the people that will come to church and they'll just be in a state of shock. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to find reconciliation. They don't know how to understand why they were hurt. They don't know how to talk about what's going on. They're in a spiritual state of shock. And then there's those that I want to call the Robert Duvals, because I love Robert Duvall, but every character he's ever played I can tell what he's about to say, because I know Robert Duvall. He's going to show up and he's going to say the same thing in this movie that he said in this one, and he's going to be the same grouchy old man when he's appointed in this position, and he's going to be the same, hard-nosed guy in everything he does. So those people are the people that walk in here and act like nothing ever affected them. They're going to be the same they were today as they were last week. They're going to be the same that they were before because they don't know how to deal with it. They're going to play the role, even though they're hurt down deep inside, even though that they struggle with the idea of being hurt by the church. And the other one is the people that will take it and run outside with it. When we have family issues, when we have problems with our children, when we have problems with our relatives, and you talk about it, sometimes it takes years to talk about it. Sometimes you build relationships with people in your family that when they hurt you, it stings so bad you don't even want to see them. You walk to the other side of the family reunion. When it's a birthday party, you try to do anything you can to avoid them. Even go and talk to people you don't necessarily know. You go through the steps of separating yourself from that possible anxiety. I run from conflict. My wife can attest that when conflict comes up, I get quiet and I try to stay out of it. Because I know that when my passion gets to a certain point, I can't hold myself back anymore. But I will say that being hurt by a family member, being hurt to that extent, sometimes makes me want to go outside of the family and talk about it. And to me, that's that third situation. The people that are hurt by the church and then leave the church and talk about the church because they were hurt by it. They go outside of what can bring them reconciliation, of what can bring them peace, of what can bring them healing to deal with, and they go and deal with it outside of it. To me, as I was studying for this, everything kept coming back to my mind of the story of the Good Samaritan. And most of y'all probably know that this Jewish man was walking down the road to Jericho, and he got ambushed by a bunch of bandits. And he got beat up and left for dead in the side of the road. And often we hear this story and we think, man, we've got to play the role of the Good Samaritan. I know when I was younger, every time I saw somebody on the side of the road that needed help, I thought about the Good Samaritan. Because in my mind, in church, everything that I was taught said I need to be the Good Samaritan. But what I'm telling you right now, the way I'm dealing with this right now, is I'm the one in the ditch. And that priest came walking by, didn't want to have nothing to do with me. That Levite who knows the law and knows God didn't want to have nothing to do with me. It took somebody outside of that to come by outside of that to come and put work into getting me better, into healing me. So a lot of times when we think about the position of being hurt in the church, we got to realize that we're the one in the ditch. We don't need to try to go smooth everything over for everybody else that's hurt. We need to deal with being in the ditch. We need to deal with the stuff that's going on in our life. We need to deal with the hurt and the pain that we've either caused or been inflicted by. Zechariah chapter 13, verse 6. You don't have to turn there. It's going to be real quick. But if you're taking notes, Zechariah 13, 6. If someone asks him, what are these wounds on your body? He will answer, the wounds I was given at the house of my friends. Zechariah is talking about sin in his life. Zechariah is talking about struggles in his life. And he says, these wounds that you see, these wounds that affect my character, were given to me in the house of my friends. It stings more. It hurts more. It's harder to deal with when you're hurt inside the church. You know, the military term is friendly fire. You know, and for those of y'all that have ever read stories about instances of loss of life due to friendly fire, it kind of makes you upset. And what could have been done to prevent it? What could have transpired that would make something so hard to deal with go away? And I can't imagine what it'd be like on the end of a phone call, or the end of a report saying that you were responsible for killing people on your side. And a lot of times we take the idea of friendly fire and we only take it so far as, oh man, it won't hurt long. But I'm here to tell you, when a friend of yours hurts you, when a family member hurts you, when someone you love and care for hurts you, it don't go away easy. It don't go away quick. And it don't go away unless you deal with it. You know, the way it lingers, the way it defines who we are, the way it changes our attitude, the way it affects the people around us, is the same way the devil does. You know, the Scripture says the devil's come to steal, kill, and destroy. He's like a lion looking for something to pounce on. And when there's hurt that lingers, that doesn't get dealt with, when there's pain, when there's things that you're not even willing to acknowledge, it's easy for him to grab hold of it. It's easy for the devil to take hold of that and use that in your life, even though you're seeking the right reaction, even though you're trying to get to that point to deal with it. You know, the church is supposed to be a place of healing. The church is supposed to be a place of acceptance. The church is supposed to be a place of reconciliation. And when those things fall off, when we have struggles in those character positions, that's when we start to realize how bad we've actually been hurt. And I'll tell you right now, no church is immune to this. There's no church in this world that is immune to hurt people. We're made up of hurt people. There's no church around us. There's no church in the U.S., there's no church abroad that hasn't been hurt at some point in time. And there's no one of us in this building that hasn't been hurt at some time. But how do we get to be a church of reconciliation? How do we get to be a church of healing? You know, that hurt will send people to build walls in their lives. Will send people to slander each other. Will send people to seek vengeance. Send people to be callous towards the church and callous towards God. But if we're called to love on people, if we're called to forgive the way He has forgiven us, Man, that's hard to fight hurt, especially hurt that lingers that deep. I've got 5 things real quick that we'll go through is how to fight the hurt. How to fight the hurt in church. First one's 1 Peter 5:8. 1 Peter 5:8. It says, "Be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that your brothers throughout the world are undergoing the same kind of suffering." The first way to fight hurt is to be alert, to understand that it doesn't take much for the devil to get a foothold. To be self-controlled and understand that it is our responsibility individually. We can't wait on a pastor to fix it. We can't wait on a lay pastor or an elder to fix it. It's our responsibility to have self-control and fix it. The second one is Philippians, second one, Philippians 4:8. So not second Philippians, there is no. It says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things." Philippians is telling us not to dwell on the hurt. These things that are good. These things that are important to us. These things that create passion in our lives. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, think about these things. Don't dwell on the hurt. Don't allow that hurt to grab hold of you and dictate what you do and how you do it. And the third one, don't blame God. You know, Jeremiah went through that struggle at the very first. He says that, let me go back to it and read it. "O Lord, you deceived me and I was deceived. You overpowered me and prevailed." You know, Jeremiah was hurting. He was wore out. He was exhausted. He was tore up from the floor up. He was wore plumb out. And he was tired of being wore out. You know, my granddad always said, and I'm sure he wasn't the first one to say it, and he won't be the last one, but he was sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, when you feel like every day when you get up, what battles am I going to have to face today? How am I going to get through this? I'm exhausted. I'm wore out. It changes what you do and how you do it. You know, God's perfect will is for us to get up and have joy and excitement that this is the day that the Lord has made. But as humans, that's tough. Especially when you're wore out, when you're exhausted, when you're tired of being beat up, when you're tired of having to handle everything and anything. So the third one is don't blame God. Because God knows you're not the only one that's struggling. God knows that even in Jeremiah's story, it's easy to say, "God, you did this to me." But God goes back and reminds Jeremiah, "I called you for a purpose. You're here for a purpose. You don't have to be a prophet. You don't have to be a pastor. You don't have to be a music leader to be called for a purpose." Each and every one of us that have a relationship with Jesus Christ have an opportunity to be called by purpose. And it's serving in that purpose that brings us the joy and brings us excitement. That doesn't mean we ain't going to get wore out. That doesn't mean that being exhausted is just going to quit because we're called for a purpose. You know, I think of Jesus' scenario where he's in the garden and he's praying before he's about to be betrayed. Man, he's wore out. He's exhausted. He knows what's going to come, and it's tearing him up. Because like Jeremiah, his insides are burning, so they don't get it. They don't understand. I haven't been able to deliver the way I need to deliver it. They don't get it. They're people. They're failing. And Jesus is struggling right in front of the Lord, and he's, God, take this from me. But if you really want me to do it, I'll do it. And to me, that's what Jeremiah is saying in verse 20, or in chapter 20. Man, I'm struggling. I'm getting beat up. I'm tired. I'm wore out. But what it is you've called me is burning within me. I just want people to understand it. Number 4 is don't give up. Seek out the loving, sincere, grace-filled people that are around you. You know, I have a personal friend of mine that was a mentor at one time to me, and he kind of took me under his wing when I was young in the ministry, and he had been doing the things that I thought God was going to lead me to. He had been around youth ministry in a way that I thought was exciting. And as years went by and our relationship kind of stretched some, and he got moved to a different church and a different area, and you know, the phone system developed where, hey, now you can text, you don't actually have to have a conversation with somebody's voice. Your relationships begin to get stretched. But I will tell you this, that when I'm hurt, when I'm struggling, when I'm exhausted, when I'm wore out, I find those people in my life that I know that are loving and caring and full of God's grace. And my dad's one of them. My buddy John that I was talking about is one of them. My wife can be one of them. But when we get to that point where we're hurt and we're struggling, surround yourself with those of us and those people around you that you know fear the Lord and seek in peace. Doesn't mean it's going to be an easy conversation to have. Doesn't mean that it's going to be an easy thing to deal with. But if you surround yourself with people seeking God's grace and God's peace, it may come quicker than you think. The last one is understand. This is in Psalms 34. Give me just a second. I had to make do. I didn't have sticky notes, so I had to make do with some cut pieces of paper, and it looks like I lost one of them. Psalms 34, verse 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Understand that God knows and He cares about you being hurt. You're not by yourself in being hurt. You're not left out. Understand that the Lord loves and cares for the brokenhearted. Loves and cares for those of us that are struggling, that are wore out. For those whose spirits have been crushed. When I was in high school playing football, we had a young man that was pretty good athlete. I mean, he had some opportunities to really go some places. And he was from Nigeria, and he came over, and he was supposed to be 15, but man, he looked like he was 25 years old. And he grew up in Nigeria, busting rock. And so when he came to the U.S., he looked like a bodybuilder at the age of 15. He was solid muscle. He was fast as all get out. He had a great opportunity to play some American football and do some things with that to be able to change his life. You know, and he got into some trouble. He got arrested. He got sent to juvenile detention. And I remember having a conversation. Me and my dad went to his parents' house, sat down with them and sat down with him, and his spirit was crushed. You know, from a coaching standpoint, this guy was made for football. The guy could bench press a Buick, run faster than anybody else on the team, and understood how to hit somebody and make it hurt.